Well, first of all, I'm Sarah Orth, and I'm the executive director of camp, and I just want to really thank you all for coming and taking the time and allowing us to really thank you. Some of you in this room have been giving to us since the 90s and longer, and there's lots of connections in the room with camp, parents who have had kids to go to camp, and if we could, the staff would probably go door to door to all of our lifetime donors and the people who have been giving year after year after year to us to thank them. But of course, our donors are spread out all over Southern California. So it's great that even a small gathering like this just gives us an opportunity to really thank you for that continued support, that continued investment in camp. So this year we're celebrating our 35th anniversary, which is amazing. And I have some really fun stats from Brian. So in 35 years, we've served more than 43,000 campers.
Wow.
And we estimate that nearly 200,000 hugs have been shared at camp.
More than
And at least. And more than 175,000 days of childhood fun has been reclaimed from cancer. So I think that's a legacy that everyone in this room can be really proud of. And so thank you for that. So Dr. Siegel, obviously I am always honored to be here with Dr. Siegel, because here is the person who really is the vision and the leadership behind Ronald McDonald House Charities in Southern California. He was the energy behind the Los Angeles Ronald McDonald House, which opened in 1980, and then camp just 2 years later. And he really now serves on the global board and has really been put his mark on the whole Ronald McDonald House charity network around the world. So I'm so happy to be here. And I asked him tonight to share a unique perspective, something we don't always get to hear, the medical kind of behind the why of camp. Why was, in 1982, why was camp founded? What was the vision behind it? What's evolved, what's changed, and then why is it still just as important today? So with that, I'll introduce.
But we all started this 35 years ago in 1982, and it started really because we had built the LA house, as you heard, and our organization was very careful when we put our bylaws together and our purpose to make sure that we covered not just Ronald McDonald House, but we covered any kind of resource that would help kids with cancer. That was not available from hospitals or from the medical facility. Really purposely did that. That's in our bylaws, in our founding documents. And at that time, I heard about a camp from actually the person who first told me about Ronald McDonald House, Ed Baum. I heard about a camp program that had been started in Wisconsin at a rented facility for kids from Chicago. And having been a camper myself, and many of you probably were campers, I remember that as one of the best time of my childhood. I loved waiting for summer camp and going to summer camp. And so I thought this could really be something special, because I remember when I was a kid, and I was pretty much of a nerd. My wife reminds me of this. I still am pretty much a nerd. But I remember that this was a Boy Scout camp. I remember that camp was really part of where I grew up. I really began to grow up as an adult there, because I had to take my own responsibility. We went on hikes, we did adventuresome things, we took canoes down rivers and capsized a few times, and stuff like that. Really were the experiences that taught you to trust yourself and to have self-confidence and have fun at the same time. And so it was not a big leap to think about Camp for Kids with Cancer as a place where these kids who were facing terrible problems, both in terms of the disease and also the treatment, which really, one of the things it did was to really knock out their own self-esteem and have them worry about issues that kids shouldn't be worried about. The camp really could be a place to give that self-esteem back, because it certainly gave me self-esteem as a kid, and I didn't fortunately have to deal with all the problems of cancer or any serious disease. But it would seem to me it would be something particularly special for these kids. So that was really, honest to God, that was the actual concept in simple terms that we all had about camp in the beginning, was let's do something that will restore the self-confidence of these kids and give them a fun time. Take them out of the hospital and the terrible environment there and give them a fun time and let them be as normal as possible. And that was the goal. It was not to have psychotherapy sessions or to have formal psychological stuff, but just give them therapy by letting them be themselves and do things that they didn't think they could do. We had, the first year we had at Calamigos, we had 60 kids who we kind of selected. It wasn't open to anybody. We kind of selected kids who were not very ill, who were on therapy, most of them, but they were on oral therapy. They weren't on very intensive therapy by and large, because we just wanted to walk before we ran. And that session, which I was at, Barbara Britt was our nurse at that time, and we had a group of volunteer counselors. We all came up there not knowing what's going to happen. Well, by the end, and I've talked about this many times, by the end of the session, I remember this vividly. We were all standing where the buses came in to take the kids back to camp. The session had gone incredibly. It could not have gone better. And we were all standing, the kids, the counselors, everybody was saying they were crying because no one wanted to leave. We had such an incredible time that literally people didn't want to leave. They wanted to continue somehow. So we knew at that point we had something that worked. We knew it was going to work. And I think that's the energy that propelled us forward in starting and keeping the camp program going. And it was part of the energy that we were able to muster to get people to support the camp too, because we could talk truthfully about what we saw these kids experience and what benefit was to them. Through the years, the people who have been on the staff or on the camp board can tell you, we've had parents come up to us, kids too, but parents come up to us, and our favorite comment is, "What did you do to our kid?" They went up a scared, frightened young person, and they came back and they were having a great time, and they were happy, and they had their confidence. They wanted to come back. And these were parents, by and large, were very apprehensive about letting them come up on their own for a week up at camp without the parents. That was something that many of them felt really, really frightened about. Well, it was obviously the direct opposite, and they couldn't believe it. And we still hear that now. I'm sure Fran could tell you, others could tell you, as we had kids come up to camp for the first time, we still have parents coming up to us afterwards and saying, "Wow, what did you do to our kid?" They came back a different person. That's what camp was all about. That's really what it was designed to do, and we've been so thrilled that it really has done that. I can give you some sort of a graphic. Some of you have heard my stories, but one of my favorite ones is that I had 2 teenage girls who had a tumor of their bladders. And unfortunately in those days, and to some extent even now sometimes, when you have that tumor, you have to have your bladder taken out. And you have an artificial bladder with a loop of intestine that's made and comes out to a bag on the surface. And that's what they have instead of their bladder. One of these teenage girls had adapted to this beautifully and was not afraid to show it to the kids in her cabin, and was not hung up about it at all, had really dealt with it. The other one, who happened to be a patient of mine, was extremely apprehensive. She would not shower with anybody around. She didn't want anybody to see this. She was really frightened. So of course, we put her in the same cabin as the young lady who had dealt with it well. And we didn't do anything else. We didn't have any kind of planned meetings or, bring them together or have discussions. We just let them be in the cabin together. And as you might expect, by the end of that session, this frightened girl who was afraid to show anything had totally turned around and was now perfectly happy and not afraid to show her. And she knew, and why was that? Because she knew she wasn't the only one. That's the whole problem. These kids, because cancer is, thank God, such a rare disease in kids, they really don't realize that there are other people who have this. And so rather than bringing these kids together and having them get frightened by being together, actually what this turned out to do was to bring them together and find out that there are other kids out there who are dealing with the same thing, and they're not alone. They're not isolated. They have other people that they can talk to. And of course, not surprisingly, many of these kids have remained friends for a long time afterwards because of the bonds that they developed at camp, because they bonded with people who knew what they were going through. They didn't have to explain. They knew what they were going through. And so that really is what camp has meant. And for a physician, we take care of these kids, or we did, I'm retired now, but we took care of these kids when they were terribly ill, when they were first diagnosed, when they're getting their intensive treatment, when they're in the outpatient clinic coming in for chemotherapy and hating it and having all the side effects and all this stuff. We realized that what we're doing up at camp, it's not in isolation. It's part of the treatment for us as professionals. It's part of the whole treatment. Treatment is not just giving the drugs and figuring out, how their white counts are or what we have to do if they get a fever or any of that stuff. It's also how we deal with them psychologically in a way that ensures that when they finish the treatment, they'll be able to be not just cured, which now 85% of them are now cured, but we also want to make sure that they have a quality of life that is absolutely optimal. And let me tell you, the psychological part of that is incredibly important, because you can be medically fine, but if you come out of this a psychological wreck, it's a terrible thing. So thank God camp has been a major force in that. I'm sure that if you went out and talked to campers and families around, they would tell you that the camp has been incredibly, and we hear them all the time, Sarah, you hear them, has been incredibly important to ensuring that the quality of life for their kids will be optimal, and they remember the camp forever. I mean, it's amazing.
The one thing that Stu didn't touch on was the sibling program.
Oh yeah, I think
cancer. Brian always says cancer doesn't happen to a kid; it happens to a family, and it happens to the siblings are involved, the parents are involved, the grandparents are involved, the next door neighbors are probably. I mean, everybody's involved. But the people who have the least ability to cope usually are the siblings. There's not much they can do. They don't have the straight information. They get filtered information through their parents, so they're often felt like they're not told the truth. And then they're human beings, so they can't help but be jealous of the sick kid getting all the attention. It's not unusual to have a sib say, I wish I could get cancer so I could go in the hospital and have the play lady come to me.
Well, they started to say, I wish I had cancer so I could go to camp.
Yeah.
We heard that.
Yeah.
And we said, uh-oh, we need to change that.
And so when we started, we were wrong. We thought the siblings were so special we should separate them, and we should have just sibling camp. But we made a mistake, and that was we didn't listen to the families. And the family said, we want to send them all together. And so we finally realized that it worked better to put them together, and we mix them all up in the cabins. It doesn't matter if you're a patient or a sibling, you're with your age appropriate folk, and that's when the real mental health goes on, because you can hear a patient talking about it's not all fun and games to be in the hospital, and the sib will say, well, yeah, but it's not fun to be stuck at home either.
The other thing I didn't mention also, which you just remind me, thank you, Fran, that was really great, is that sort of a side product of the camp was that parents who are dealing with a kid with cancer often sort of have to put aside everything they're doing to focus on that kid. And that's one of the problems with siblings, that they often get missed, right? But the parents are many of them feel like they just have to be watching that kid like a hawk and be on them like a hawk. What camp has done is given them a week to be able to do other things, like be with their spouse and have not be so consumed with watching their child and being concerned about their child that they can spend time with their spouse or their younger children who can't come to camp. But on the other hand, the other thing I didn't mention is that when we realized that was an issue, we actually started family camp. And that family camp was started for the kids who were too young to come to camp. Now it's under 9, right?
Yeah. Birth through 9.
So that they could come up with their families and have a family camp. And then when they got to be 9 years old, they graduated up, and they and their sibling could come to the regular sleepaway camp. So all these things we learned in the process, as Fran said. I mean, this was a learning experience. We were, I think, the third camp to start, and only started a year or two after the others. By the way, there are now, more than 90 camps for kids with cancer around the country.
Since we bought our facility in '96, we have been slowly investing over time. We built new cabins in 2012. We opened the dining hall in 2015, and so we've been slowly raising some other money. And I'm very excited that we just recently got a $2.5 million gift to that will build another new group of cabins and hopefully some staff housing and some things that we really need. And the amphitheater, thank you. Long time awaiting the amphitheater. And that's really exciting. And one of the things that was really special also about this gift is it, $250,000 of it will establish a maintenance endowment. So, camp facilities, 60 acres, 35 buildings, a lot of duct tape and a lot of hard labor. And so it's a lot of maintenance. And so, a big portion of our operating budget every year is really just maintaining that facility. So a maintenance and endowment, having that designated is an amazing thing, and having this foundation really step forward and say, we recognize that this is really important, is great. And I think that really is part of our bigger strategy over the long term as we talk with families and we talk about their long range plans and how they're thinking about legacy themselves, that this is a great opportunity for you to think about that within your own family and how you can help us in the future. So that's something we've been paying a lot of attention to in our charity, and something I just wanted to share strategically with you about how we're thinking about the future, because we want camp to continue to be there. We want it, cancer research has come so far, 85%, going from 85% of the campers not making it to 85% making it is amazing. But now we have other issues because kids are living, and there's survivorship issues, and there's all kinds of things. And I think Fran said it best, we're preparing them to live. And so it's really vital to us that we build, pipelines to allow us to continue to provide this and into the future. So thank you again so much. Please feel free to stay. We have food. Please talk, ask questions.
We have more wine.
More wine, yes.
More food.
Plenty more
Run
food.
out.
And again, Stu and Barbara, thank you so much for opening your home to us. And thank you. It's really wonderful.